Bill Maher made a curious prediction on Real Time the other day. He's talking to David Axelrod, and there's somebody else on the panel too. I'm blanking on who it is. But they're talking about the Trump verdict, and here's what they say.
I would really be shocked if this judge gave him a prison sentence for this.
I mean, MAGA Nation will go nuts. I don't know if that's a reason to or not to do something, but they will.
Yeah, but one of the things about this apocalyptic language that you hear from all of these, the Amen chorus, is they really are inviting violence, and that's a big concern of mine. And Trump is completely unrestrained in suggesting that maybe that's appropriate. I mean, he hints that all the time. That's how he got in trouble on January 6th, and he's doing it again because I think he's more desperate now than he was then.
But if they put him in jail, I know it'll happen because the judge's name was Juan.
Yes.
Everything becomes racial in this country. You know, that's partly because of our horrible, despicable racial past, partly because some of that racism lives on in the president, and some of it because the far left makes everything racial. But that's what it's going to be. I mean, you see that movie Civil War that's out now?
I have not. I've heard that I should.
Yeah, no, it sucks.
All right, could you?
I'm sorry.
Just save me 2 hours.
Yeah, I did. Well, I'm sorry. That's a harsh review. The actors are great, but it sucks because they don't explain why we're in the Civil War, and it's just not realistic. First of all, California and Texas are on the same team, and they never explain that. The federal government is fighting the Western Alliance, which is us in Texas? Really? They're on the same side?
The guy who made that was trying to not make it like historical in the sense of like if we had a civil war, it would be, you know, these states versus these states. He tried to almost like take our current iteration of politics out of it. That's why he did that, right? Like that was very purposeful on his part. Did Maher expect it to be like California versus Texas, or all the red states versus all the blue states? I don't know. Anyway, he hasn't even said the part yet. Wait for it.
And there's black people fighting alongside of white people. I'm sorry, but
now I don't even have to see the movie.
No, you don't. A civil war in this country, I'm sorry to say, becomes a race war. That's the sad truth about this country. And if they put him in jail, I mean, that's the first thing his supporters are going to say is, "Oh, that's what it is."
Well, that's the first thing
a black
he will
district
say.
Attorney. You know, all these people who are the district attorneys, they're black. The judge was not white. This is what it is.
Honestly, I could not disagree more. I couldn't disagree more. First of all the talk of there's going to be a civil war, I mean, Tim Pool's predicted that, 412 times? Never come to fruition. So I would chill on the discussion of the possibility that it might happen. No. So that right off the bat, that's one point of disagreement, that he seems to indicate that if Trump is found guilty, well, he was, but if he's put behind bars, that could lead to a civil war. No, I don't think so. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two is it definitely wouldn't break down along racial lines. I'm sorry, it won't. There are plenty of people of color who are MAGA, right? It's not like it used to be the case that like 97% of black people would vote Democratic. Okay, now it's like 90%. So 10% of black people are pro-Trump or vote Republican. Hispanics, it's way more mixed. It used to be like, 70% Democratic? Now it's closer to 50% Democratic. So the Hispanics would be all divided up in a potential race war, and black people to a lesser degree, but they would also be divided up within a race war. And it's also just that's not the biggest divide. It's a divide. It's not the biggest divide. I think the haves and the have-nots are a way bigger divide. So going along class lines, I think rural versus city is a bigger divide. I think there are just basic partisan politics is a bigger divide, and that does not break down along racial lines very cleanly. Maybe general broad trends, but it's not that clean. So no, a civil war in this country wouldn't become a race war. And then also, look, here's the point that's a little bit more, I don't know if it's contentious. I don't know if it's edgy, but there's a possibility that even if Trump gets jail time, it's a fucking dud, right? So look, I don't want to make that prediction because I don't stand by that 100%, but I'm definitely 50-50 on it. Let's say, just for argument's sake here for a second, let's say Trump gets sent to prison, regardless how long it is. 6 weeks, 6 months, a year, 4 years, I think is the max. Trump has in the past, in the recent past, when he's had various court hearings that he had to show up to, whether it's an arraignment or whatever the fuck, or when he was arrested in Georgia, there are times where he said he tried to call people to do a massive protest. He tried to have a giant crowd of 100,000 MAGA filling the streets where he was in the courtroom. And nobody fucking showed up. Nobody showed up. You had maybe a dozen people, maybe 50 people at most. And just fucking Dudsville, bro. That's happened a number of times. Now, why is that? Well, people saw what happened on January 6th. They know that a lot of those people went to fucking prison. MAGA feels like the feds have infiltrated all their movements. They're not going to risk their lives for a day of protest for him where nothing's going to fucking come of it, right? So there's a chance, even if he gets time behind bars, it could be a fucking dud. He could go out sad. You know, the last gasp may have been January 6th. That is very, very possible. Now, it's also possible that's not the case, right? There's evidence on the other side. The evidence on the other side is MAGA's always trying to dox these jurors and dox the witnesses, dox the judge and his family. There's all sorts of violent threats going out 24/7. There's certainly a committed percentage. I don't know what it is of the country. 20%, 30%, 35%. There's some percentage of the country that are truly in that Trump cult, and they think he is the Messiah. They think he should be our overlord, emperor, god, king. Without a doubt, that's also a thing. So look, I have the odds at exactly 50-50. For argument's sake, if we say, let's just say he's going to prison, okay? Which is not, I'm 50-50 on that too, right? Or 60-40 against. But let's say he goes to prison. Could be a total dud, or it could be a brief, sort of blow steam off, bunch of protests, bunch of riots, but then eventually it quiets down, right? Could be either one. What's definitely not going to happen is a civil war, and what's definitely not going to happen is a civil war along race lines. So I don't know, man. Classic Bill Maher. This isn't as egregious as a lot of his other clips recently, but it just shows you he's such a fucking sloppy thinker, right? Like, and it seems like he doesn't even realize that this movie that he's shitting on, which, by the way, I didn't see, that was very purposeful of the filmmakers to make it different. He's like, well, one, I don't understand. Why don't you have blue states versus red states? Okay. I'm Bill Maher. Okay. I smoke weed and have sex. Okay. It's like they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to make it. Okay, if you make a movie like that, it's about a civil war and how one would actually, if one were to occur in the U.S., how it would unfold. Well, then you open up the whole can of worms of, well, what's the plot line? And how does it end? And who wins? And aren't you tipping your hand in terms of your own politics massively in that scenario? And there's nothing less tasteful in art than telling and not showing. That's why he wanted to do it differently. If he did it that way, he'd have to tell what his politics are, what his story is, and screaming it from the rooftop and become a fringe, partisan thing, right? He didn't want that, which is understandable. But Bill Maher would know nothing about showing and not telling. That motherfucker's whole life is telling. To be fair, so is mine. To be fair, I'm a teller. But, I don't know. He's cringe. That's the end of it. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.